We're on the doorstep of another college football weekend, and all eyes are on Kansas State, which travels to Oklahoma State on Saturday. The Wildcats have had an additional week to prepare and are coming off a major victory at Mississippi State that's vaulted K-State into the polls. Kellis Robinett calls in from Manhattan. Also, KU, which played competitively against West Virginia last weekend, visits TCU. The Horned Frogs are out for revenge. Kansas defeated TCU for its only Big 12 victory last year. Jesse Newell breaks down the Jayhawks. Missouri beat writer Alex Schiffer reviews the Tigers' big victory over South Carolina last week. Mizzou is off this weekend. Later, a previous Kansas State-Oklahoma State game is a topic in our conversation with Chiefs wide receiver Byron Pringle. He came up with his first NFL reception last week, continuing Pringle's path as a professional. 2 years ago, he starred for the Wildcats in a victory at Stillwater. We'll hear his memories from that game. All of this on the Friday, September 27th edition of SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast, sponsored by Big O Tires. I'm your host, Blair Kerkhoff. Kellis Robinett covers Kansas State for the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle. And Kellis, it occurs to me that we have not talked since you returned from Stark Vegas, Mississippi, where you watched the Wildcats defeat Mississippi State in a game that I think the outcome, we thought it was possible, but I didn't pick it. And Kansas State went down there and won, avenging last year's defeat. And it's only 3 games into the Chris Klieman era at Kansas State, but that was a heck of a win for Kansas State.
Yeah, first signature win for Chris Klieman, and really the first signature win Kansas State has had in a while. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, but that major non-conference game they've scheduled for a while has not gone their way. They couldn't beat Stanford, they couldn't beat Vanderbilt, they weren't even in the same stadium as Mississippi State last year, so those losses really kind of took some wind out of their sails in past years, and now it adds a lot to it. They're ranked in every poll. I saw our friend down in Oklahoma, Barry Trammell, even has them in the top 10 right now. So some people are very impressed with what they're doing, and you couldn't really ask for a much better start.
What struck me about that game was the Wildcats didn't play a perfect brand of football. They made mistakes. That fumbled punt changed the momentum early in the game, and yet, after when it was over, when Kansas State walked off the field, a winner, I thought the better team won the game, even with the mistakes. I thought Kansas State was the better team. Obviously, the score indicated that Kansas State was the better team, but they didn't get pushed around like what happened last year. And I just thought that Chris Klieman's game plan and approach was on point and did the job. And it doesn't that open some eyes? Maybe you mentioned the respect that Kansas State's getting nationally, but maybe winning over some skeptics who just weren't sure what the Wildcats were going to be like in Klieman's first year.
Yeah, definitely. I think the pendulum maybe in some ways has actually swung a little bit too far the other way. I've seen Kansas State fans, that they're not ranked even higher than they are after a 3-0 start. So some people now are really banging the drum for this being a true Big 12 title contender. I guess we'll find out if that's the case pretty quickly here with the game at Oklahoma State. But yeah, there's really, obviously you can complain a little bit about what they did because they didn't play perfect against Mississippi State. There were, for any of us who dealt with Bill Snyder and watched him over the years, there were a lot of things that would have driven him crazy and mistakes that really wouldn't have flown over the past decade. But you really got to hand it to coach and the players for just being super positive. And, it's kind of interesting to see their approach to those things. In the past, one big mistake really kind of derailed the whole thing. But now it's like, hey, you know what? You were trying to make a play. You made a mistake. That's okay. Just make it up to me on the next series. And that's what they went out there and did. I thought they were probably going to lose as the fourth quarter began, but then the very next play, they get a 100-yard kickoff return, make some defensive plays, get a touchdown to take the lead. They got stronger in the fourth quarter, so props to them.
Yeah, I was going to say that the fumbled punt return that led to Mississippi State's first score was offset by a kickoff return for a touchdown. So you're right. I think that's a good point, that they didn't get down when they made mistakes. They didn't play tight. They still seemed loose. They kind of stuck with the game plan. And hats off to Kansas State. As you mentioned, the It doesn't get easier. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, how you go from Mississippi State to an open week to a game at Oklahoma State, and even though the Cowboys are coming off a loss at Texas, they've been solid this year. I didn't expect them to win at Texas, but played them tough, and that was the Cowboys' first loss this season. I know that you have written a story that has appeared in both the Kansas City and Wichita, at least on the websites. I don't know at the papers yet, but the last time that Kansas State went to Stillwater, it was quite the game for quarterback Skylar Thompson and new Kansas City Chief wide receiver Byron Pringle. What do you remember about the last visit for the Wildcats at Stillwater?
Well, really those two things. Kansas State entered the game, I believe, as a 21-point underdog, so nobody gave them much of a chance at all. But then they figured out some creative ways to fool Oklahoma State's defense. They sent Byron Pringle out on 2 post routes, and for whatever reason, Oklahoma State's deep safety was completely convinced they were going short and came up, so he was completely open for some easy touchdowns. And then they had a really nicely designed play where Pringle ran underneath another receiver and came wide open for another touchdown. So, I mean, they really had Oklahoma State on their heels, and Kansas State ended up only winning 45-40, but they really had to kind of let Oklahoma State back in the game in the fourth quarter for that score to be that way. They were up, I want to say by like 21 or 24 at times in that game. So you don't see it very often that a team's a 3-touchdown underdog and then goes on the road and wins handily. But that's what they did that time, and they actually followed that up and beat Oklahoma State here last year when I don't think a lot of people gave them a chance in that game. So I think that bodes well for this team going on the road to a place where they've won before against an opponent they've got a winning streak against. I guess this year, though, everybody is giving them a chance in the game, and they're ranked, and it's kind of weird. They still are the underdog, but Kansas State probably has the target on their back in this game. So a lot of new dynamics to it for sure.
It seems with Oklahoma State to be typical of a Mike Gundy team. He has always preached balance, and you look at their stats. They rush for 270 a game and they throw for 263. Well, and you add it up, that's a pretty healthy amount, 533, 534 total yards per game. I wasn't sure about Oklahoma State coming into the season because I wasn't sure about the quarterback, and it turns out that the freshman Spencer Sanders is just tearing it up, really. I mean, he's completing 65% and 7 touchdowns, 3 picks. And as always, they have playmakers at running back and wide receiver. I mean, you pick the year for Oklahoma State, and you'll find the 1,000-yard rusher, the 1,000-yard receiver, and the all-conference candidate quarterback. They seem to do that as well as any team since the old Cowboys of Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. So it seems to me that it's a really good matchup for the Wildcats. They win this game, they go down to Stillwater and win, then maybe time to recalibrate a little bit how we thought this season might unfold for the Wildcats?
Yeah, if they win this game, which, obviously no guarantee, but if they win this, then all of a sudden you're really probably picking them to start 6-0 and host Oklahoma undefeated when they come here for Game 7, because their next 2 are at home against Baylor and TCU. Those aren't gimmies either, but if you can start out the year with wins at Mississippi State and at Oklahoma State, it's going to be hard to convince anybody they can't just win those next 2 games. So that would be obviously a dream start for the Wildcats if it happens. And you definitely have to recalibrate and start to wonder, well, maybe their ceiling is quite a bit higher than we thought. And that's what's at stake here. I mean, if they win, that kind of thing is at stake. If they lose, then maybe start to wonder about those next 2, and the optimism falls down a little bit. But yeah, we've seen what Chris Kleiman can do against some other teams outside of the conference, and now it's time to see what he can do against the Big 12.
By the time this airs, Kellis, Kansas State will have had its first basketball media day, and I'm just going to assume, I haven't seen where Kansas State has been projected in the Big 12, but after a couple of years in the NCAA tournament, sharing the Big 12 championship last year with Texas Tech, I've got to think that no matter what the losses are, and they're significant for K-State, but no matter what the losses are, the program is to the point where the expectation is NCAA tournament every year.
I agree totally, and I've seen some projections that have them, like the football team, down at 8th or 9th in the conference this season. I think that's more of a nod to how strong the conference could be than any kind of disrespect toward Kansas State. But at the same time, they've still got Kansas State making the NCAA tournament even with the low finish there. I personally think they're going to be higher up. I think as soon as Xavier Sneed said he was coming back for his senior year, this team went from, a borderline NCAA tournament team to more of a lock NCAA tournament team. And, maybe it won't play out that way, but they've got Sneed offering some experience. They've got Cartier-Jada coming back at guard, McCall-May-Ween down low at center, and then everybody just loves their new freshman, DeJuan Gordon. I personally think he could be the best player Bruce Weber has recruited at Kansas State. We'll see how long it takes him to reach that kind of potential, or if he ever does, but I think it's there. I think he'll be a true impact freshman, maybe the first one we've seen since Marcus Foster. So I have high hopes for this team. The schedule's maybe a little bit harder than it has been in the past, and dealing with that might not be so easy. But I'm optimistic. Yeah, like you said, I think they've raised the bar, and I think they'll hit it again this year.
Okay, so it's September, and they're off the bubble, according to Kellis Robinett. Kellis, it's great talking to you. We will catch up soon to talk football and basketball about the Wildcats, and appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, sure thing, Blair.
Let's hear from Jesse Newell, who covers Kansas. We're here with Jesse Newell, who covers the Kansas Jayhawks for the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle. He covered the KU loss to West Virginia last week. And Jesse, a KU football loss, not a big story. It's happened many times in the last decade.
I've been there many times, Blair.
You've seen a lot of them.
Yes.
But this one came maybe with a little disappointment, a little sense of anticipation, with West Virginia coming to town. Looked like before the season we thought maybe it was a winnable game. And then, of course, what Kansas did the previous week at Boston College. What was the sense of the game in the aftermath?
Yeah, I think two things can be happening at the same time here, Blair, because you can sort of gauge this season. We all know, bottom line is people are going to look at the win-loss record. So that's one thing. And so this was one of the most winnable games for Kansas. And the Jayhawks didn't win it. They lost 29-24. They're at home against West Virginia, probably another team that's going to end up at the bottom of the Big 12. So there's a disappointment there. However, you take a step further, you take a deeper look under the hood with this, and I think you look at it and say, this Kansas team is all of a sudden very competitive in these games and statistically is doing things that we haven't seen from them in a long time. So what I'm talking about with that is, I've cited this quite a bit on social media, but KU has 7.4 yards per play and allowed 4.6 yards per play to West Virginia. I looked it up. In 2019, those teams that have had that happen in a game gained more than 7 yards per play, gave up the opponent had less than 5 yards per play. They've gone 73-2. So KU basically played well enough to win, did statistically things well enough to win. The only thing they forgot to do was win the football game. But once again, for Kansas, you have a team that, there wasn't a bunch of timeouts wasted. Guys were in position to make plays. They were playing hard. The formations were right. They looked organized out there. They looked disciplined. And I think all these are sort of adjectives for the team that KU fans have been looking for a long, long time, no matter the coach, no matter the players, no matter, sort of who's been charged as the athletic director. And so, yes, I think there are a lot of positive signs from this game, even if for the players, for the coaches, for everyone in that program, it's very hard to swallow because, man, you're so close to 3-1. You're so close to having a Big 12 win. You're so close to getting over some of these hurdles that have kept the program back for so long.
It looks like Carter Stanley is the guy. He started his fourth game. In previous years, by now, Kansas had been on its second quarterback. Yeah. But Carter Stanley appears to be Les Miles' guy.
Yeah, it sure seems that way. And he stuck with him. And obviously, he had 3 interceptions, I think, in his first 50 passes thrown this year. And if we believe the Miles to Go documentary video from ESPN+, Les Kenning radioed down to Les Miles during that game after the first interception and said, I'm going to give him one more series. Now, maybe that's a little bit of Hollywood. Maybe they splice some things together we don't know about. But maybe there was a moment where it was close for Carter Stanley to be benched. But right after that, man, he was amazing against Boston College in their 48-24 victory. And then last week was good. Too many mistakes still. That's really what held Kansas back when I talk about, hey, you gained 7 yards per play and you gave up less than 5. How do you lose that game? Well, one way is turnovers. We know that they swing games. Carter Stanley had a fumble, and he also had an interception, both very costly. So sometimes he can be a gambler. Sometimes those are plays where if you're KU, you're hoping that they don't happen because they obviously have such a negative impact. And right now the defense is not taking the ball away. But all in all, I think they have to like what they see from Carter Stanley. And when they seem to open up the offense and allow him more decision-making, it seems like he's really been effective. And that's been the last two games, and especially the second half against West Virginia. I think KU averaged about 9 yards per play in the second half. So if KU can keep that up, it seems like Carter Stanley can take them to some good places.
I looked at the attendance and wasn't overwhelming by any stretch, but after talking to you and some others who were at the game, the students showed up, which is different.
Yeah, it was a really good attendance, to be honest with you. And you want to talk about signs of the program taking steps forward. This is the third straight home game this year that they had a higher attendance. I think it was like 35,800. But you talk about the students, almost all the way up to the top. That's
amazing.
It's a very rare occurrence.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
In Lawrence, hadn't happened since 2007, 2008, maybe 2009, that sort of range, and unless it's been a really, really big game. Not only that, because they have the alcohol sales in stadium now and they're not allowing people to leave at halftime, those people are staying in the stadium, which is a big change from a year ago and previous years where you'd come out, even if Kansas was winning, they'd come out to a half-empty stadium, which it has to be dejecting when you're coming out to that. And then not only that, I wrote about this in my game story, but fans in the southwest corner of the stands gave KU's players a standing ovation as they went to the locker room, even after a loss. So again, you have fans that are engaged in the game, you have fans that are seeing progress, you have fans that are seeing a competitive product and guys playing hard and being pleased enough with that to show their appreciation even after KU loses a football game. So I think, again, it's not a win, and it wasn't a win. And I know that KU's coaches and players are very disappointed in that, but take a step back. If you take a deep breath, this to me indicates that some of these games in the Big 12 we thought were not going to be competitive, they might be competitive.
Kansas goes to TCU Saturday, and the Horned Frogs find themselves in the most unusual of positions. They get to avenge a defeat
to Kansas.
Kansas last year. One of the only, a couple of conference wins for KU over the last several years. What can you tell us about TCU?
Yeah, well, they seem to have some, momentum is week to week, obviously, but just lost at home to SMU last week in a game that was very disappointing for them. They had just snuck into the top 25 poll. And sort of speaking to the change in the program that I talked about with Kansas, this is a game in years past. KU goes on the road to a Big 12 team that has been ranked in the season, and KU would be a 31-point underdog or a 35-point underdog, or 2 years ago, I think they were a 37-point underdog to TCU at TCU. Right now, it's about 16-point underdog in Vegas. So again, talking about Kansas catching up a little bit to the back of the Big 12, it sure seems like that's possible. TCU seems to have some quarterback problems, has had issues throwing the football. Gary Patterson's going to have a good defense. You can expect that. And the major scary thing for Kansas is just the last instance of them going to Fort Worth, which honestly was the worst KU game I have ever covered. KU had negative yardage going into the fourth quarter. KU finished with 21 total yards, which is the lowest total of any team since at least 2000 because the NCAA record books don't go past that, so we can't even figure out when it was. We're talking they ran the clock in the fourth quarter, to get the game over with quicker. This was like an all-time horrible Kansas football loss. So if they can get rid of those nightmares and those ghosts of the past and remember more last year what happened in Lawrence, then again, KU, 16-point underdog, crazier things have happened. They have a chance in this one, and like I said, in years past, I'm not sure that's something you would have said about a Kansas team going into a place like TCU, so that seems to me to be progress.
All right, safe travels. Jesse Newell, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, thanks, Blair.
Hey, let's hear from Alex Schiffer, who covers Mizzou. He's calling from Columbia. Alex Schiffer covers the Missouri Tigers for the Star. He joins us now, and Alex, you saw a game that the Tigers played last weekend against South Carolina that we were all sort of wondering about. I know the Tigers were favored, but they had just not had any success in the series against the Gamecocks, and odd things had happened when these teams have played. But when it was all said and done, Missouri's best moment of the season, best game, finest moment, I just thought Missouri showed up and played that game and played it well.
I would agree. I think going into the game, and yourself included, I don't think anybody was expecting it to be a comfortable win for Missouri the way it was. I think we were all expecting it to be a four-quarter game, something going to happen with the last 2 minutes or so left in the game. I agree. I think it was one of Barry Odom's best wins. It's a huge monkey off his back of being able to beat South Carolina. And this team seems legit now. It as we talked earlier in the week on the last pod, I don't think it fully takes away the Wyoming loss, but it definitely lightens the sting of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're right. We looked at Missouri's schedule before the season and saw the opportunity for a great start, probably a national ranking, assuming the Tigers were going to start outside the top 25, which they did. And then the Wyoming loss just tarnished that and left such a bad feeling that I thought that the Tigers needed to find a way to make up for that outcome. I'm not saying they've done that yet, because I did expect them. When I was looking at Missouri's schedule in the preseason, I saw South Carolina as maybe a coin flip type of game, a jump ball game. Well, Missouri won that game and won it convincingly, so I'm sort of back on the idea that Missouri can have a special season, and that was a hiccup. It was the exception, the Wyoming loss. So tell me, how did it come together? What did Missouri do well against the Gamecocks?
Yeah, I thought the defense was very, very good. I thought the biggest thing about the defense to handpick it was the safety play. Josh Bledsoe and Tyree Gillespie were a mess against Wyoming. I mean, they ran into some of their own players on some tackles. They over-pursued, and I thought they were all over the field, that they were extremely they were a little bit of everywhere. I'd say, there was a great sequence in the first half where Tyree Gillespie had a sack on a safety blitz, and then the following play, he had a pass breakup in the end zone that would have been a touchdown of Brian Edwards. And Missouri's not really known for a school having safeties. I think this is their best safety tandem since they had Willie Moore back in the day. So I think that was probably the most impressive, is that their secondary was a huge reason why they won when they've been a liability in the past. And I thought the offense did just enough, even though they were kind of shaky in the first half, to get its act together in the second half. And that Tyler Beatty touchdown I thought was huge.
Any win is welcome, and any process to a victory, is accepted. But I think it's important, just maybe for appearance's sake, that with a defensive-minded coach in Barry Odom, that side of the ball perform well. And it was embarrassed. Frankly, it was embarrassed in the Wyoming loss when the Cowboys had, was it just a shade under 300 rushing yards, and they're a team that lets you know that they're running the ball. They don't throw it much. And I did think that it was a bad moment for Barry Odom. So when they win a big game that turns on defensive play, I just think that's a very good sign for Barry Odom in the program.
I agree completely. I think what the talk has been since that game is just that, and I think the dynamic with South Carolina is interesting, because I think both going into that game, both Barry Odom and Will Muschamp were coaches that were hired because of their defensive prowess, and neither one of them have really done much on that side of the ball in their time there. And they've been successful and gone to bowl games, but not really because of the defense. And we were all kind of saying in the press box, this is what we expected out of Barry when he got hired. A stout defense. You look at where they are on the national rankings, I think a lot of people thought that would be the expectation at some point for him. And I agree. The fact that Barry Odom's defense, it reminded me a lot of 2015, Barry Odom's lone year as a defensive coordinator at Missouri, where the offense was terrible and you were essentially needing the defense to force takeaways and do whatever they can to give the offense good field position if you wanted them to win. And again, I think this is a good offense that just had a bad day against South Carolina. Kelly Bryant himself said he forced some stuff, but I think that the fact that the defense did so much to kind of bail out the offense was an encouraging sign, because I don't think that's going to need to be a regular thing. I think the defense, the offense is good enough on its own to win games, but the fact that the defense can give them this kind of backup is huge.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with the offense after, there were just some turnovers and some botched plays in the Wyoming game, but they still hung up 500 yards and 31 points. It was the 37 that was alarming, and the fact that they've just given up 21 points since then is such a good sign for the Tigers. Okay, open week here. The break in the schedule comes, and after that they wrap up the non-conference portion of the schedule with a game against Troy, and after that it's all SEC opponents. Should we feel optimistic about prospects for Missouri going forward?
I think so. I mean, I think Troy, who I was a big fan of under Neil Brown, just with what he did there, was obviously now West Virginia. I think that you look at the rest of the schedule, I don't think Florida scares you as much as they used to. I thought Notre Dame looked vulnerable against Notre Dame. Georgia looked vulnerable against Notre Dame.
Right.
And, Kentucky's been shaky, if not just down from last year. I think that a 10-2 record is still, which is where I picked them at, still not out of the realm of possibility. I think that 9-3 or anything below that would be a disappointment now, the way the schedule sets up.
And of course, we're all waiting to hear about the the NCAA decision, where the Missouri appeal of the NCAA decision that banned the Tigers from postseason play this year. We haven't heard, and there's just no way of knowing when we're going to get that information. Okay, Alex, let's switch it quickly. We're recording this on a Wednesday afternoon, just before you're going over to Men's Basketball Media Day for the Tigers. I just want to get a quick thought from you on what you think this Tigers season is going to be about. I don't think that they are being highly regarded in preseason prognostications that I've seen. Bottom half of the SEC. But what do you think about these Tigers? There's some pieces here that I really like. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting deal. I saw in another story that Konzo Martin said if Missouri's healthy, they can go to the NCAA tournament, and this, barring any last-minute incidents, should be the first year in which Konzo Martin has his best players healthy. Obviously, the Porter brothers have been injured his first 2 years here. And I think that that's an interesting thing for him to say, because that's something he's saying. That's not something we, the media, are saying, that if we're healthy, we're going dancing. So if they're healthy and they don't go dancing, that's going to be an interesting conversation at the end of the year. But I think that they're a very interesting team that has a lot of interchangeable parts. They have guys that can play the four that maybe not have been there in years past, in Trey Jackson and Kobe Brown, two freshmen that they're very high on. I think that they're going to look a lot like Villanova, where they have a lot of different guys that can bring the ball up and play multiple positions and defend multiple positions. And I think, as usual, the biggest X factor of this team is Jeremiah Tillman's foul trouble, and as he figured it out. If he does, he might be gone at the end of the year to be a draft pick, but at least try his chances as a pro prospect. But they're very high on Drew Smith, who had some interesting stats at Evansville. He shot 50% from three, averaged 2 steals a game and 12 points per game. Very good defender from what I'm told. And I had an NBA scout text me recently and say, we're hearing a lot about Drew Smith. What do you think of the hype on him? And I said, Missouri loves him. They think that he's the point guard Konzo Martin didn't have the first 2 years at Missouri, and that he can really open up their offense and spread the ball and help solve their turnover problem. And the scout replied, we're hearing a lot of good things about a guy that didn't play a single high major opponent in his first 2 years at Evansville. So I'm curious to see what the Drew Smith hype train looks like, if it exists. And I'm curious to see, they had a lot of freshmen last year that played a lot and looked good. Javon Pickett, Xavier Prince, and Torrance Watson, most notably.
Right, all guards, right? All
guards. And I think, and Mark Smith, as a sophomore in his first year, was one of the nation's best three-point shooters before getting hurt. I think a lot of people just assume when you return a lot of guys that they all got better. And I think that that's a bit of a dangerous assumption. But they do bring back – they didn't lose a lot, and they do bring back a lot on a team that many people think is going to be very improved. So it'll be interesting to see. They're going to have a lot of early opportunities. I think their second game's at Xavier. They play Illinois, obviously, every year. They have Temple in the non-con. They'll have the chance to build a decent resume for the tournament going into SEC play. So I think that health is going to be the biggest thing, is that if all their guys are healthy and they play well and they don't make the tournament, I think it's an interesting conversation now with Konzo, because he's the one that's saying that.
All right, yeah, and of course the schedule also includes a trip to Kansas City for the for the Hall of Fame Classic, where I think Butler is their opening game opponent, and then they get Oklahoma or Stanford in the title game, and then SEC play starts. They open up with Kentucky at Kentucky in the conference opener. So, all right, Alex, great stuff. Great talking to you, and we will chat with you again soon.
Sounds good, Blair. It was always a pleasure.
We'll be back with Chiefs wide receiver Byron Pringle after this break.
When it comes to saving big on tires, do the math at Big O Tires. Start by saving $100 instantly on sets of 4 Big O brand tires with paid installation purchase. Then receive an additional $50 by mail-in rebate on qualifying purchases using your Big O Tires credit card. Add it all up, and you can save as much as $150. The tires you need, the savings you want. Only at Big O Tires, the team you trust. Hurry, sale ends October 13th. For the location nearest you, go to BigOTires.com.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. On Thursday, I caught up with Chiefs wide receiver Byron Pringle at the team's training facility. We covered several topics, from his first NFL reception last week against the Baltimore Ravens to his big game for Kansas State against Oklahoma State 2 years ago. Take us through the play. You only had 2 offensive snaps in the game. One of them resulted in a reception to you.
Okay.
What was the play, and was it just a check down, or how did you end up with the ball?
I guess Pat went through his progression, through his reads, and I was one of his targets, and he hit me with the ball.
Did you do anything special with the ball? Did you talk to anybody after the game?
No, I didn't do anything special with it.
How did it feel, though? I mean,
it felt great. It was actually a dream come true, a stat that count towards your career. And I don't know, I really wasn't surprised, like happy about it. Like,
yeah.
It's the game.
You knew it was going to come at some point,
yeah.
Right? But it took a little while for it to happen. I want to go back to, let's just go back even to when you decided to come out from college. You have this great preseason, and you're having a great game in that 4th preseason game. And I looked at the replay the other day, and I don't know if it was contact but when you came up with the hamstring injury, that had to just be devastating to you.
Yeah, it was. It was just a thing that you have to overcome and keep working. You know where you want to be, you know where you want to go. So when minor stuff like that happen, you got to keep your head up and keep a smile on your face and keep doing everything the organization tell you to do. The trainers, the coaches, and just being a great teammate like throughout the process of you being on IR.
And for you, that started, I imagine, maybe the night of or the day after that injury.
Yes, sir.
What did the team tell you about what they wanted to do and how they wanted you to still be part of things?
They had just told me I had to come in for treatment, and I ended up finding out that I had to have surgery on my hernia, and that they was placing me on IR. So I didn't really know too much about the IR process. And once I had found out, I was able to attend meetings. So that was a plus side that helped me become the player who I am today.
Okay. When were you back at 100%? Was it OTAs or take a little longer?
I was back like 100% like late December.
Okay.
Early January.
So you were ready to go into OTAs with
yeah.
with every intention of
yes,
being here. So this year's training camp comes and goes, and you have another good one. But there's a little bit of it's funny how it kind of worked out. You get waived, and then you get re-signed to the practice squad, and then were there some days of confusion there with what was going on with you in the roster?
No, I just kept a smile on my face. I didn't know what was going on. I just attacked every day like a normal day that I do, with a smile on my face and just think positive.
Okay.
Ain't no used to getting down or anything, because you know how the process work playing this game. So ain't no used to getting mad or anything. You know you put your all into it. So
where does this come from, the positive attitude?
Just being overcome some of the adversity I had to overcome, like growing up and being in trouble.
Yeah, you had some. I know you had some troubles when you were in high school in Florida.
Just kept positive, and I knew what I wanted to be in life, so I just always just kept a positive mindset.
Did the idea of playing football and trying to have a career in football help get you on that track when you were going through troubles?
Nah, once I had got out of trouble, I just sign up for school to be. I told myself I'm gonna get a college degree and play ball.
That path took you to Butler County first, and then to Kansas State. The Wildcats are playing Oklahoma State this weekend. I imagine that opponent has some good memories for you.
Yeah, they probably do.
Tell me about that game that you played against the Cowboys a couple years ago.
It was one of my best college career games. We knew going into that game somebody was gonna have a breakout game, and I didn't know if it was gonna be me or not. But we knew it was gonna be a receiver, and it so happened to be me. And I just took advantage of the opportunity when the ball came my way.
I think wasn't there a return also in that game for you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, ended up 4 touchdowns. I think you were Big 12 Player of the Week that week as well.
Yes, sir.
Did that game have anything to do with your decision to try the pro path next year, or had you already?
I already was thinking that if I make it, I make it. If I didn't, I didn't.
Okay.
I graduated and I got 2 kids I had to go and raise, so
right.
I wasn't finna stay in Kansas.
Okay, but you didn't get drafted. Signed as an undrafted free agent. Was there a little bit of now I got to go out and prove myself?
No, I just knew it was gonna come down to that. I wasn't thinking I'm gonna be a high draft pick or drafted anyways because of my background.
Okay, and how about the fact that this is where you ended up with this offensive-minded organization with a quarterback who is at the top of his game? Is this as good a place as you could have ended up?
Yeah, this is the best place I could have ended up. Yeah, people that's working. Like they didn't come here to like socialize and say, "Oh, I'm in the NFL." They come to work every day with a positive mindset. Even the guys around them come with a positive mindset. They attack work every day and beat the opponent every weekend.
What's it like being in this offense?
It's a great opportunity. Great place to be because you have Coach Reed, Coach EB, and my position coach Greg Lewis. They all installing plays to get the playmakers the ball and put up to light up the scoreboard.
And I imagine just about every team you've ever been on, you've been the fastest guy on the team. It's tough to be that guy here, isn't it?
Yes, it is tough. We got a lot of fast guys on our team, especially in our receiving room.
It's fun to watch. All right, Byron, thank you so much.
I appreciate you.
Links to the stories we discussed can be found in the show notes and on kansascity.com. Thanks to the hardworking Kathy Liu and Leah Becerra for putting together today's and every day's show. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review SportsBeat KC. It helps, and we'd like to give a shout out to Eddie Shakes and KC Chiefs 4 for their recent positive reviews. SportsBeat KC will return next week. We'll be wrapping up the Chiefs-Lions game. We'll have much more throughout the week talking sports in Kansas City. How about if you start with a word that doesn't exist? That's the best one.